Hey everyone, welcome in to another daily editorial here on the KE Report. I'm chatting with Adrian Day, and we're going to be focusing on a few stocks that Adrian follows within his reports to his subscribers. Also, get general comment on the market assessment, what Adrian is seeing in terms of inflows, outflows in his funds, as well as some of the ETFs for the precious metals. Adrian Day is president of Adrian Day Asset Management, also manages the Euro Pacific Gold Fund. Now, Adrian, we are recapping a letter you sent out to your subscribers back on April 23rd that highlighted some positive developments in smaller companies that you follow. A couple prospect generators here, as well as a smaller royalty company. First one is Lara Exploration, traded LRA. This is a prospect generator in South America. We have a couple asset updates, the main one being focused on an upcoming resource and PEA. Adrian, take us through Lara Exploration, some of the recent news that's caught your eyes.
Yeah, okay, no, and thank you, Corey, for having me. Let me just, if you don't mind, start by saying, I'm always happy to talk about companies that I really like because I get excited about it. You want to share the good news with as many people as you can. At the same time, I'm always a little bit concerned, shall we say, when people buy a stock because they heard someone recommend it without having a way of following what that person is saying. Because with all these companies, with any company, there can be developments, you can change your mind, or it can do so well, you want to sell it. So I think people who this is not just me, people who take a recommendation from someone, which is fine. I mean, I take recommendations from my dentist. I don't do my own dentistry. But I think if you take a recommendation on blind faith from someone, you need to follow what that person says. I hope you don't mind me saying that. And I'm sure you and I will update these for your listeners. So just briefly, Lara, you started with. Well, I like Lara a lot because they just have great management. The management is just the most all three companies we talk about have great management, but Lara has very solid management, and they do not spend a lot of money. They're not spendthrifts at all. So salaries are low, G&A is very low. They have a few things in the company. The most important thing, as you mentioned, is this Planalto Copper Project in northern Brazil. It's in a good part of the country. They've just finally made the final option payment for part of a project, so they now own 100% of it. Capstone was did a lot of good work. They backed out, or they gave the property back early in the year. I don't think, there's no indication to think it was anything that Capstone saw with the property that they didn't like. It would have been their first and only project in Brazil. And I think they simply had other things on their plate and decided to focus their energies there. So now it's 100%. As you say, they're doing an updated resource estimate, and they're doing a PEA. Sort of unusual for a prospect generator to spend the money on those items. But the truth is they were so close to being completed using Capstone's dime. But Lara, I think rightly, decided to go ahead and complete those. And frankly, Corey, at that point, I wouldn't be surprised. Now, this is speculation. I wouldn't be surprised if they start to get some interest from, mid-tier and junior, not the large ones, but mid-tier and junior copper companies that want to, expand activities. So that's one that I'm very excited about. The cash, they don't have an awful lot of cash, but again, this company knows how to preserve cash. So I'm not worried about, I'm pretty convinced, I'm pretty sure we won't have the need for another financing anytime soon. And then in addition to this, they've got a couple of other, things that could be big, but this is where the value is right now. Stock has gone up a lot. It's now 84 offer. Doesn't trade an awful lot. It's only traded 66,000 today. it's an 84 cent, but I would feel very comfortable paying 84 or 85 for it in the current environment. I don't think you need to go much higher than that.
So, Adrian, understanding that this news is coming, the resource estimate, the PEA, this is a stepping stone. But look, this company, as you said, probably is still looking to get this project in another company's hands. What are catalysts after this resource estimate and PEA that can, A, hold the stock up here, even drive it higher?
Well, that's a really good question. First of all, we don't know I don't know what the PEA is going to be. The PEA, they haven't given a date for when that will be published. They're just, completing certain work. So the PEA may not actually be towards later in the year. So that's some near-term news on, we of course assume all this news is positive, not negative, but that's near-term news on an updated resource estimate. Then they are expecting a couple of payments on a couple of projects, and that's going to be over the next, earn-in payments from other companies. And that's going to be over maybe the next sort of 3 or 4 months. So I think you could easily get four, and they will press release that when they do get cash, simply because, I mean, if it's meaningful cash, if it's a few million, they'll press release it simply because they don't have a lot of cash. So putting cash in the treasury will give some comfort to the market. As I mentioned, I'm not concerned about them having to go out and raise money. So we'll have 3 or 4 items of hopefully positive news over the next 6 months. I think that will be enough to keep the speculation going. And let me just remind people, the team at Lara now, Miles Thompson founded the company, great man. And he is the executive chairman. He's the chairman now. And they brought in Simon Ingram as CEO. So you've got the team together now, together with Chris McIntyre, who's a corporate development. You've got the team that actually built and sold Reservoir Minerals. And so, Miles knows how to explore. Miles knows how to do joint ventures. Miles knows how to keep cash outflows low and manage a business. Simon knows how to package a property and sell it. So, yes, I'm very excited about this, to be honest with you.
All right, well, that stock has done well recently, that rebound in March and continuation through April. Let's look at Midland Exploration, traded MD on the TSX Venture Exchange. This stock hasn't had really the same bounce that Lara Exploration has. Some of the recent news is that Rio Tinto amended an option agreement on lithium projects in the James Bay region, added one project for a total of 11 now, and increased its spending commitments. What are you looking for out of Midland Exploration?
Again, good people, good financial and technical management, strong balance sheet, over 7 million, with more money coming in this year from cash payments and tax credits, but 7 million right now, Canadian. Midland is perhaps a more traditional prospect generator, although it does do work on its own projects. It does 100% work on its own projects, perhaps a little more than some prospect generators. But I think if I can start with what we might say the bad news, you mentioned that the stock really hasn't had a bounce, and you're being kind of kind there because it has been an underperformer for quite a while, actually. And I think there's a couple of reasons with that. One is, even if you're a prospect generator, even if you've got a lot of joint ventures, you still have to have the news. You still have to have a discovery and a catalyst. And I think although Midland has had, we can call them discoveries, but they haven't had, the big discovery that someone's going to come in and buy. And so I think there's no particular imminent catalyst that we know about, right? The other thing, and because of that, I think that Midland has sort of become a tired story. You know how that happens sometimes, Corey? I mean, if someone came absolutely fresh to this industry and looked at Midland and looked at everything they have going on with major companies, Rio and BHP and many others, and mid-tiers like Probe and Wallbridge, they've got a lot going on. I think someone would say, wow, this is a great story. Let's buy it. And I'll be patient. But the truth is, people who bought it 5 years ago saying they will be patient maybe aren't so patient anymore. Now, in a way, you can say that's good news. It's good news for two reasons. One is the stock is very, very undervalued right now because it hasn't had that bounce. And the second thing is, the longer this sort of weakness or softness continues, the more that the shares are going into stronger and stronger hands. So when they do have and I should, while I think of it, Corey, I'm sorry, I should say that we in money management as well individually, I own all of these companies that I'm discussing, and some of them we own in size. So Adrian Day Asset Management, for example, owns 19.9% of Lara. We're not a filer yet on Midland, but let's just say we're close. So we do own these in size. They've got a lot going on, and it's all in Quebec, and Labrador, but it's mostly in Quebec, which, as you know, is a very, very good jurisdiction for resources. Everybody focuses on the tax credits, which are important to the company. But frankly, the other thing that's important is you've got a good workforce, you've got support of the local population, you've got support local communities, and you've got support from the government. Yeah, Barrick is a joint venture partner. And it's not just gold. They're looking at, as you mentioned, Rio's looking for lithium, Barrick's looking for gold, BHP's looking for copper, primarily copper and nickel. The new exploration program of BHP is a nickel program.
So, Adrian, you made the comment. Look, this stock's been around for a while. It has some good partners, but it hasn't really moved. What sort of news could move this stock, put it more on investors' radars, simply because, yes, they do work with large companies. They have drill programs, but investors aren't paying attention.
Well, I think it's just a kind of, if the stories become tired. So I think a success somewhere, and they've got a dozen or 15 opportunities for success. A success somewhere, and all the news is good, like Rio, as you mentioned, Rio up in the budget, an increase in the land. That's a positive. So there's a lot of positive news, but something really big, I think, will attract attention. And as I say, there's a dozen or 15 different things that could be successful. And it'll happen. I mean, the problem is with with exploration generally, you often just simply don't know when you're going to have success. I think back to a stock that some of us know, Virginia, which was Virginia Gold, which was one of my biggest successes. I think I can say that without running in foul of the SEC. But, we owned that for maybe 12 years before they had the Eleanor discovery. And then, once they had that Eleanor discovery, the stock just started ramping up as it got better and better and better. And, eventually they sold it twice. We like to say Andre sold his stock twice, company twice. He sold a royalty to a Cisco, and then he sold the project to Goldcorp. But my point is, you had to hang around for maybe 10 years or 12 years before you really had the success. So, and that's a classic. We're talking about a really big success there. So yeah, these things can take a long time, and the exploration success doesn't come on schedule, unfortunately.
So, Adrian, are there any assets, any deals within Midland here that you're most excited about?
There's a couple, yes. I think the Rio exploration on lithium is very prospective because Rio really wants lithium. They've made that publicly clear. They're spending a lot of money on this. I mean, 5.8 million on early stage exploration in a joint venture is a lot of money, right? And I also think the BHP on nickel, because BHP is fairly aggressive on the nickel. Those are the two I would say. But the problem with those two, because you're dealing with big companies, they tend to be very, very methodical with their exploration. So it may take a little longer, but yeah. But I think we're going to have success at one of those two, and probably some of the gold they're drilling up in James Bay.
All right, something to look out for. Let's move over to the royalty company that you provided in that April 23rd update, Orogen Royalties, traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol OGN. You are highlighting the 2023 financial numbers, record revenue, record profit, net income of $1.8 million. Profits came from royalties as well as prospect generation income here. More broad question, when you look at this now larger world of these junior royalty companies, how do you separate them? Because it seems like we're constantly hearing record revenue, record profits. It's still generally small numbers, but how do you separate the best ones?
First of all, I look at the people, and that means a lot of things. What's their track record? Have they been successful? Do they seem to know how to execute deals? Are they honest and ethical, etc.? So the people is important. The other thing I look at is, the balance sheet, which means a lot of things. The runway, do they have any, how long the cash will last? Do they have any cash coming in? And then the third thing, and I'll get back to that in a minute if I may, and the third thing is just really the number of projects that they have. Now, a large number of lousy projects still is a lousy company. But you don't want to see a royalty company or a prospect generator company that has like two projects. It's just not enough to get the bulk because the odds are stacked against you on discovery. One of the things I always look at and does concern me about a lot of the prospect generators and the royalty companies, the smaller ones now, the whole point of these business models is that your the business models are different, of course, but Orogen, for example, is like a royalty generation. So they will go out and prospect properties and then farm out the properties in return for royalties, with an emphasis on the royalty as opposed to an emphasis on the property ownership. But the model is still sort of similar in that they are looking for projects and then farming them out to use other people's money. One of the things that does frustrate me a lot about some of these smaller prospect generators and royalty generators is when the business model is supposed to limit the cash outflow, right? It's supposed to have other people doing the bulk of the work and the bulk of the spending. And it should allow the company to maintain a reasonable balance sheet. And the problem is an awful lot of these companies have very high overheads, very high salaries. They're spending a lot of money. They don't structure the deals so that any money comes in, and the money can come in from sometimes as property payments. In a bad market, it's difficult to get property payments. But from management fees, if the prospect generator actually runs the expert, this often happens. The prospect generator will manage the exploration project for the senior company in the early stages, and they will get a management fee for doing that. So there's various ways. You look at a company like Orogen. Orogen not only has a very strong cash balance, it has 18.5 million cash, but it's also, get this, free cash flow positive and has been. for like 2 years. Now, the only that Mondoro is another one that has positive cash flow, but it's very unusual for junior companies, as you know, to have positive cash flow. So when I look at these companies, that's something I look at very, very much. What's the overhead? What's the G&A? What are the salaries? And how much cash do they have? How long do they have that the cash will last? If that makes sense. That wasn't very well put, but you know what I mean. So our Orogen again is in a very, very strong position. It has the cash on the balance sheet. It has positive cash flow, as you mentioned, both in the Ermitaño royalty, but also which is going to last, a long time. I mean, they're saying 8 years, but it could easily be longer than that. And then also positive cash from their prospect generator activities. So that's that. But of course, as you know and everyone knows, in addition to that, they have this 1% royalty on Anglo Gold's Silicon Merlin deposit down in southern Nevada at the bottom of the BD trend, which is turning into just a phenomenal deposit. In January, they announced a resource estimate on Merlin, and the two deposits are adjacent and will probably eventually become one big pit. But at the moment, they're talked about as two separate deposits, 13.2 million ounces. And then last week, Anglo did a technical study on Merlin, which for some peculiar reason was started on page 250 of their 13G filing with the SEC. So a lot of people would have missed it, but in that study, a technical study, they confirmed the 9 million ounces on Merlin, right? So four is in Silicon, 9.1 in Merlin. They confirmed that in the technical study, but the really good news is they decided in this technical study, they contracted the life of mine. So it's a shorter life, but of course that means you're producing more ounces per year. It was going to be 400 to 500,000 ounces a year for, 16 or 18 years. Now they've contracted it so that in the 2 years of waste, 2 years of just mining waste to get down, and then in the first year of real production, they had 1.1 million ounces, and in the second year of production, are you sitting down, Corey? 1.8 million ounces. There's only one mine in the entire world that produces more than 1.8 million ounces. Now, that, of course, is every year. This is just the one year. But nonetheless, to put it in context, that's a huge, just a huge amount of mining. And the thing, of course, is when you contract the mining, they did not say when they're going to start it, but in January, they were talking about 2029. So assuming that hasn't changed, if you bring that mining forward, that of course increases your net present value on the project. So, this is going to be an astonishing mine run by Anglo, one of the top mining companies in the world, in Nevada, one of the top mining jurisdictions in the world, and Orogen has a 1% royalty on it.
So that internal organic growth through, again, their kind of main producing asset here, cash flow wise. Quick comment then just on these markets, Adrian. What are you seeing in terms of inflows, outflows, and if you could share some recent data you shared with me in terms of GDX as well, please.
Well, this is astonishing. I think most people are aware, most of your listeners will be aware, but the ETFs up until recently have been getting steady outflows, even in January and February when gold was moving. The gold ETFs were still getting outflows. It has changed a little bit in the last 2 months, but we're still seeing, like I just calculated, not calculated, I looked at the last 10 days for the GLD. GLD reports their inflows and outflows every day. I looked at the last 10 days. 7 of those 10 days had outflows. So, I mean, this is astonishing with gold flirting at 2,400 and people are selling. What's more astonishing to me is you really don't have you really don't have any broad new enthusiasm for gold or gold stocks at the moment in the United States anyway, or in Europe. We know the Chinese have enthusiasm at the moment. And so, I can't really talk too much about flows into my fund. It's a publicly traded fund, but I can say this. So talking to other mutual fund managers, everybody is saying, yes, we're seeing some inflows, but it's not steady inflows. It's not every day. It's not huge. That's a sort of general trend. And if you want numbers, if anyone wants, hard data, you just look at the GDX because, as you know, in the US, an awful lot of people in the US, if they want to buy gold stocks, they just buy the GDX. You look at the GDX, the latest numbers I have are for April. This is going to be April the 19th. And it looks like virtually every day for the last 4 weeks, there have been outflows. And some of those outflows, 2 of those days have been the largest outflows in the last year. So, we just have to stop and think about that. When the gold stocks are up 30% since the beginning of March, and yet the GDX is getting consistent, steady, and large outflows, what is that telling us? I guess there's 2 reasons. I mean, I thought about this. I guess there's 2 reasons that we can account for this. One would be a lot of long-time suffering gold stock holders are finally seeing the opportunity to get out of them. The other thing could be that more people, we know that hedge funds in the US are buying gold, some hedge funds. It's not retail. It's not larger institutions like pension funds and insurance companies, and they're not moving into gold stocks. It's not generalist mutual funds; they're not moving into gold funds. With all the indications that we can see, and remembering that some of these reports are always a week or 2 or 3 after the delayed. So it's not, but we know that some family offices are moving into gold, and we know some hedge funds are moving into gold. And maybe, Corey, wonder of wonders, maybe some hedge funds are actually buying individual gold stocks and actually hedging. Can you believe that? Which is what they're meant to do, and hedging with the GDX. And so that might explain why they're selling in the GDX when the individual stocks, obviously, the indexes are obviously doing well.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see something we continue to talk about. The demand from the Western investor still doesn't seem to be there, but it feels like it's starting to pick up. Gold stocks starting to get a little traction, but interesting stats that you have regarding GDX. Adrian,
It's
thank you
interesting, but
very much.
can I just say one thing to finish? This is amazingly positive. If you think that gold is flirting at 2,400, we know about China and central banks. But if you think that the GDX is up 30% since March and still remarkably undervalued, of course, we won't get into that. But if you think it's up 30% and yet there's no rush into these stocks yet, I mean, just imagine what's going to happen when we start to get inflows every single day, when the GDX gets inflows every day, when institutions start to put 0.5% or 1% of their assets into gold. It's going to, it's going to be explosive.
Very well could be. We're all, I think, still waiting for that too, but just interesting to see some of those recent stats. Adrian, thank you very much for your time. We'll chat again probably next month. Hope you have a great rest of your week.
And you, thank you, Corey. Thank you, everyone.